Greetings everybody, it's Amy from Amy Baughman Sew and Quilt, or Sew Informed, depending on which channel you're picking it up at. Today I want to talk to you about sewing buttons on by machine. We recently had a retreat and I was surprised how many people did not know how cool your function is sewing buttons on by machine. Trust me, they'll never fall off. Here is my little Kimberbell project. Now, Laurie from Kimberbell did this great video about mock hand sewing the buttons, where she held them in her hand and she whip stitched them so they looked like they were sewn, and then she glued them on. And that's a great tip, but I don't hand sew anything. So I'm going to show you how to do them by machine. And then we're going to talk about the specialty feet that are available. If you don't have one, there's always a way to use just the foot you have. All right, these are the two most common feet, and it kind of stretches across most of the brands. Every brand has a version of it, but these are the most similar, and you're going to see that yours probably looks like this too if you have one. This is just what we call a floating button foot, where it hooks under the ankle and behind the ankle with these bars, and these little rubberized feet grip the button. This one is another one. It's a little more fancy, but it does its job. It has a little slide here that you push forward and back, so you could actually, that little tongue right there, so you could actually put like a shank on your button. But this has a little flange here that sticks out that you push your button in. Let me see if I can do it real quick. You push your button in and you line up your holes right next to these red dots. And you can see that little flange is pushed forward, which means when I sew, I'm going to have a little thicker loop, and it's going to be, the button's going to be jiggly like you would for a coat. I'm going to pull the flange back. Sorry for getting in there. And that's usually what I do when I'm sewing flat buttons on a project. I pull the flange back so it's nice and tight. And it doesn't matter if you have a 2-button hole. If it's a 4-button hole, after you sew 2 buttons, you just rotate it and sew your other 2 buttons. It's not a big deal. This particular foot just sits on and holds it, and you have to kind of line it up. If you don't have a button foot, well, there's always tape. You can just take a piece of tape, tape it down, take the foot off, and just rest your ankle of your foot right here, and then do your zigzags. But these work exceptionally well. All right, I'm here and I'm on my Janome 15,000. Everybody always asks what I'm sewing on, but this is the setup for my Janome 15,000. So I'm going to choose my buttonhole menu, and most of you have a menu if you have an electronic machine that has a buttonhole menu. This little symbol right here is your sew on a button menu. And if you have an electronic machine, you may hear your feed dogs drop, or you may have to manually drop your feed dogs so it doesn't try to sew while you're sewing in place. You'll notice the stitch width automatically came up at 3.5, and my tension's kind of irrelevant right now, but the standard buttonhole the buttonhole distance is usually 3.0 to 3.5, but the ability to be able to change it is why we have the sewing machines we have. So even though this is a smaller button, this is a larger button, and this is a specialty button, believe it or not, those two are the exact same distance. This one's a little smaller just because of the kind of size, shape, and the tinier the button, of course, the tinier the zigzag. So the foot that I have on now is one that just holds everything in place. So the nice thing is my machine already goes to the left-hand side. I turn my hand wheel first just to make sure. It just takes a second. Hang on. Boop. And when I see it swing, if it doesn't swing in the right spot, then I just kind of give it a little wiggle. And then I just use the machine, and it's programmed to sew about 7 times across and then stop and tie a knot. I can use my scissor, and now it's perfectly sewn. If I had 4 buttonholes, I would just turn it and sew my other 2 buttons. So the buttonholes. So it's that simple. When you have a specialty guy like this guy, it takes a little more patience, and I actually would recommend you probably taping him in place. Because of its size and shape, it's kind of irregular. So I would want to be able to hold that while. So I'm going to take while it's in one spot. Okay, let's get it right in there. There you go. So now when I turn my hand wheel, I'm going to see that that is way too wide. So as I make it shorter, I make the button perfect. the width perfect for those holes. And you just cut and you tie a knot. So that's how simple this actual foot is. And it hooks onto the back. So I hook it onto the back first. If yours has 2 bars, it hooks onto the back first, and then it hooks into the normal presser bar foot. This guy I can't show you because it belongs to my brother, but it's the same function. You're going to drop your feed teeth or choose your buttonhole sewing, sew on a button feature, but this little guy springs in and holds it into place, and I match up those 2 little dots, right? And so it's going to be perfect. And this little tab right here, when you push it forward, it's going to give you that wiggly shank on your button. So those are the 2 simplest ways to go your buttonhole feet, sew on a button feet, or tape. And if you have tape, you're just going to put it right underneath your ankle and go from there. So let me show you on this the Kimberbell a little bit how to do some different placements, and we'll go from there. All right, I started doing some placements, and of course these are her green bubbles coming out of her cauldron, and I want to just work on my placement, kind of auditioning buttons. That guy we know is way too big, and bubbles get bigger as they go, so it would have to be way up there. Some of these have different colors and textures, so when I find the way I want them, and I want them all above the cauldron, one of my favorite things to do is just take a little bit of wash away glue stick. This is the same stuff, you know, your kids eat when they're in school. And I use a little bit of glue stick. Takes a second, holds them in place. And if I don't use glue stick, then I'm back to taping them down. But the glue stick works really well. It's just enough to go in there. Now this spot is particularly heavy, and this is how Lori came up with that idea to whip stitch the button threads, you know, through the holes first and then glue it on. But I will tell you, your sewing machine will go right through that without a problem. So a little bit of glue stick, maybe a little bit of tape, just audition some of your strange little odd green buttons you have, and it makes an easy way to finish sewing on a button on any project. But we love our little Kimberbell fall bench buddies here that are kind of new to Kimberbell, and of course we have them in the store. So get some buttons out, set up your machine, and give it a try. Don't be afraid. You can crack a button, no big deal. You can break a needle, no big deal. But once you learn how to do it, you'll never break anything again. It'll be perfect. So don't forget, because the more you know, the more you sew.